Captain McCormick was with the Army for 22 years, served in Desert Storm, Iraqi Freedom, has multiple Purple Hearts, multiple Bronze Stars with Valor, a Silver Star with Valor. He has sons serving in the service right now. And when it comes to national security, you'll probably hear he's quite passionate about this. So, James, if you want to go ahead and launch us into this, let's start.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, welcome, everyone. Let's get right into it. Let's do a quick overview. Energy security equals national security. Now, understand, we don't get into the conversation about what energy is better than the other, because we believe that we need all sources of energy. And you'll look, if you do some research on even the wind tunnels and things like that, you're going to see there's a natural gas connection to that as well. And there's also a petroleum connection to all of that. So we will still be dependent on oil and natural gas for decades. There's just no getting around that, and that's just the fact. The question is will we get our energy from North America or elsewhere else, or anywhere else? Let's talk about that a little bit. That becomes where I get very passionate on what we do with Vets4Energy, because I think it's important that you understand that we have some states that still import energy resources from countries like Yemen and Venezuela. And when you think about Yemen, maybe you don't think about it much with Venezuela, but with Yemen, we understand that that's where the USS Cole was at when it was bombed back in 2000. And, you know, people take that very seriously when we think of, you know, the potential, the possibility, you know, for me to be able to heat my house in New England, or wherever you might be. You know, is it possible that some of the money that I'm contributing, some of the money that I'm putting into, you know, the heating of my home or even fueling my car, you know, is that money potentially going to make it into the hands of a terrorist? And the fact that we don't know, no one can tell us without any doubt that that's not happening, then it's safe to assume, because they don't know, that the potential exists, and it exists and it's a high potential. So I think on the lines of, you know, let's really look at what we're going to do to help North America. Let's talk about jobs and careers for veterans. You know, we're not talking about a job that's minimum wage. You know, most of these jobs are in the upwards of $65,000 to $100,000 a year. I mean, they're good careers. They're not just jobs. I like to use the word career because I think that makes a lot of sense, and it makes people stand up and take notice. So at Vets4Energy, we get involved because we want to know, hey, what is this going to do for our veterans, for our veterans' families? That includes your children, your grandchildren. Because if the veteran doesn't have a job, you know, and here we are, and it's almost Christmas time, and everybody's spending a ton of money out there, you know, trying to make sure that their kids have a decent Christmas. Or if you don't celebrate Christmas, you are doing something else. You're trying to provide for a birthday, maybe an education. You know, if you don't have a good paying career, chances are you're not going to have a level of stability and happiness. So that's the other thing that we look at. And then this all plays into, you know, a lot of different things, you know, the depression that people experience and things like that. I mean, come on, there's nothing better than having a job that you get up and get dressed and go to every day. I'm telling you that. That is the key. That is the key to survival for anyone. Government revenue. Yeah.
I just want to jump in with you for 1 second, James,
yeah.
Just to clear up any possible misunderstanding. Is you're not recruiting people to join Vets4Energy for a job. This is about the jobs that energy creates across the U.S. if we start doing more domestic access, more domestic production, and building that infrastructure that I know you're going to get into, because those are the salaries that pay twice as much.
Absolutely, absolutely, and because you are veterans and you're volunteers within this organization, Vets4Energy, you help make that possible, because we add that level of expertise, and we add a voice to this fight that allows, you know, perhaps, you know, politicians or just voters in general to know that, hey, I didn't know that we're spending, I didn't know, and I'm in New England. Let's say I'm in New England, and I didn't know I'm paying a 50% or higher rate for my energy cost here. And oh, by the way, some of that energy is potentially coming from Yemen. That's important for the voters to know that, and it's important for them to know that, because when they start to look at, what are things that are important to them, I can guarantee you that that becomes very important when it hurts their pocketbook or the national security aspect of it. So we play a role in getting that voice out there, why we need these jobs. So we look at different things. We have many energy issues, legislation and regulation that we have to deal with. Vets4Energy is about those affecting security. All sources, including renewable, fossil, and clean fuels. Friends, we don't get into the, like Chandler said in the beginning of this, you may not want anything to do with natural gas and oil or coal or anything else under the sun. You may just be totally green energy. Okay, we need you in this fight as well. We want to hear your voice. We want to have the conversation with you. But we want to be able to have the civil conversation with people, that when we can sit down at the table and we can show the value in all of these things collectively working together. So we have to focus on all sources. We cannot just be one or the other. And we may not agree 100% of the time, and that's okay. Officials will listen to veterans more so than they will to most other folks. Veterans have a good perspective. We've seen life, in some cases, from 40,000 feet up. We understand what it's like to run out of fuel if you're on a convoy. We understand what it's like, especially those, that experienced life in various forms of combat operations. We understand what it's like to go out there and say, you know what, I don't have any grease to lube up my Humvee. And I can't tell you how many times we dealt with the whole supply structure in Iraq, but we did deal with that as well. I mean, we had issues with that. And we had people that were, very crafty and creative at being able to, to get this stuff on the local economy. But it became an issue. So we have to talk about that. On this issue.
In that picture, I'm going to interrupt you on a couple of these, because you've also been in some of these meetings. So this picture down at the bottom was when you guys took a visit to the Senate offices. And this was South Carolina, Senator Scott. But what's it like when you meet with a senator, or even if it's more likely somebody in one of the staffers there? Are they receptive?
They are the majority of the time. It depends. Your personality can bring out either a good or a negative response. But the 98% of the time, you get a positive response. Even they will sit down and listen to you as a veteran because they really hold what you say with some value. So the meetings are generally, formal yet informal, to the point to where we do have some casual conversation where we actually get to see the individual, the elected official, or their staffer in light as a human being, as just a regular person, just like us. And I like it when we have those kind of conversations, because then we open up a door to really discuss, the root issues that we're dealing with. And we're really talking about security, national security. What are they doing, and what can they do to help us to become a more energy independent and therefore increase nation, and therefore increase our national security posture. It's critical that we have access to fuel and energy. There is nothing more critical than that, other than food and water, and it's all important, and we have to be able to work together. We have to be able to.
Well, I just to beat that one a little bit more. You've got a team here at Vets4Energy that helps schedule meetings for people, but you've also been involved with this for quite some time. Can people call and just get their own meetings? If they want to just go in and meet their elected officials, is that pretty easy to do?
That's pretty easy to do. And at times. It's good to have at times. At times. Let me back that up a little bit, Chandler, because you need the team to help you do that. Vets4Energy brings a level of credibility because, we're not, we don't just blow with the wind. You understand? We stay very focused on our message, what we're here to talk about, what we're here to do. We try not to get distracted with some of these sideline conversations. So therefore, if you become a volunteer with Vets4Energy in your state, and let's say you want to talk to your senator, it's very easy for you as a veteran, as a member of Vets4Energy, to talk about national security and energy issues, to go through the Vets4Energy program director and to get yourself an appointment in front of some of your state legislators. Now, once you start developing that credibility, we have some wonderful state chairpersons that are all over the country, and they've developed a level of credibility over the years that allows them the ability to get to gain greater access to their elected officials. And while everybody likes to step back and say, well, we voted them in, they need to take time from me. Well, not necessarily. It can be a difficult task sometimes to make those meetings happen. You have to be credible.
So it's good to have the brand of the organization behind you. And that's why we're there channeling it through. But I also wanted to there are people who are really concerned. They're nervous. They don't think they can actually talk to somebody in the staff of their elected officials, and it's hard to get to. And just want to remind people that politics should not be scary. You can get involved into this.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you should be involved in this. Let's just get to that point right there. And I hear a lot of veterans say that, well, that's too political for me. I don't want to get involved in it. Well, let me tell you what happens when you don't get involved in it. They pass legislation without your voice, and they do things without an input from you that could negatively impact the whole structure, the whole kit and caboodle, as my grandfather used to say. You don't let your voice be heard, then don't be upset whenever they pass a bill or a resolution that takes away the ability for us to provide 40,000 jobs, in North Central America, because somebody didn't go in and explain to the politicians, the people that are making these decisions, and how much that having access to this affordable, clean energy is going to help us in the future, not only with the jobs, but also with our national security. And so a lot of times if you don't get involved and you sit on the sidelines, don't complain about what the ball game score is at the end of the game. You got to get in and play. And that's just the way that it is. You got to talk about the issues to friends, family, other veterans. You got to refer veterans to Vets4Energy. If you're involved with Vets4Energy right now, and I think some of our callers are involved with Vets4Energy, get out and do some recruiting. It doesn't cost anything to join Vets4Energy. And what we focus on is very, very critical to our national security, but also very critical to your future and the future of your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and generations long after we're gone will be affected by the decisions that we make today. If we decide to sit on the sidelines and not be active, well, then that's an issue.
And that's what we're trying to let everybody know is it doesn't take a whole lot to start getting involved. These are easy ways to get involved in our organization, which is referring people in, taking action on the website, which is sending an email in. Exactly.
And don't be afraid to ask the questions either about the hard questions. Don't be afraid to ask us. If you're a green energy person, then I would love to hear what you have to say. I mean, and I know that there's probably some of you on there right now that maybe just you're only focused on wind and solar, but let us explain to you the bigger picture, and let's find a way to channel that energy to something that's going to be very focused and going to help America and help our veterans as well.
For those who don't know who their elected officials may be, there's two ways to find out. You can come to our website, that Vets4Energy, and go to the Take Action Center, or you can go right to usa.gov, and that helps you find all your legislators, both federal and state as well. Mm-hmm. Had to do that little plug out there, James. Sorry.
Well, we need to. Yeah, you're right. And it's not just congressional leaders and senator leaders and senatorial leaders that we're talking about in D.C. It's very important, and we've started to focus on the states. The individual states have their own state legislators. They have veterans councils in each state in America. We need to contact those people and reach out to the veteran service organizations, become involved. Let them allow you to have the opportunity to have the conversation about energy and about how it affects our country. Now, the state legislators are a little bit easier to get into. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that they're a lot easier for you if you live in the state. I have talked to other state legislators, but I have to have someone, for instance, if I went to New Hampshire or Vermont or Maine or Massachusetts, it's good for me to have a resident of that state. Because when those legislators look at me, they look at me, well, you really can't impact me at all because you're not voting in Massachusetts. You're not voting in Maine. So that's where you state chairmen become very critical to what we're doing. Each state has its own legislative body. Reach out to those folks. Talk to those folks. Sit in on some of their committee meetings. Get to know everybody on the energy councils in both your House and your Senate. Veterans councils are a great place to go. Veterans councils are generally revolved around all of the VSOs in the state, and each of them appoint a representative, and they talk about things that are critical to that state. I just went to a meeting with the Veterans Council in New Hampshire. What a wonderful, robust group of veterans that were in there. And they were from all branches, all different time periods. So it was great to sit in there amongst so many wonderful people and to be able to tell them, this is what we do at Vets4Energy. We're here to talk about national security, and we're here to talk about veterans' jobs, but we're here to also talk about why it's important for us to have access to our own fuel so we can stop buying it from the enemy. It makes no sense, folks, for us to be buying the bullets to shoot us with. It makes no sense to do that. And I'm not saying that we may directly do that, but indirectly we do that in our country, and we have to stop it. If we don't stop it, it's not going to get any better. You keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And the last 15 years have been kind of rough for a lot of us that have fought in these wars. And it goes on today. So VSO meetings, Veteran Service Organizations, look at your Veteran Service Organization, your VFW, your American Legion, Military Order of the Purple Heart, DAV. The Vietnam Veterans of America have been hugely active. The VFW has been wonderfully engaging. American Legion, so many people will listen to you.
Well, it's surprising because this picture right here is with the Florida Vets4Energy volunteer, and he went to do an energy update on some issues, and they found it so fascinating. His 3 or 4 minutes that he gave a speech, then they started asking him to come back every month. So it's not only a good way to start talking about the issues for Vets4Energy, but it's a good way to start networking with other veterans too.
Absolutely. It's a great networking opportunity, Chandler. Op-eds.
I'm going to interrupt you, James, because I want to make sure we end on time like we've promised.
Gotcha.
This gives us about 10 more minutes.
Go ahead.
No, I was just giving you a time check on that. That was my purpose.
Op-eds, we have a lot of veterans that write op-eds or they're quoted in op-eds. So, you get involved in this. We will call you and say, this is something that's coming up that could potentially threaten national security. Would you like to, have a voice in that? And we have a lot of published quotes from our veterans in the organization. Experts for reporters to quote, radio programs, social media, articles. The whole radio programs are great. We have somebody on a radio program probably every month now, and sometimes every week. We did a local events and tours. We did this tour on the Military Order of the Purple Heart Trail. This was a great event. It was down in Florida, and I got a chance to go down and travel the Purple Heart Trail, and to raise some awareness to what that trail really means, and to also open up the eyes of Americans to other places in this country that maybe we're missing. You know, we can't take the family vacation anymore because everybody's working 2 or 3 jobs. You know, if you had that $65,000 to $100,000 a year job, you know, and the energy was affordable in America, imagine you would be able to go on more vacations and do cool things like this. But we did this primarily to bring awareness to this. Trade shows and booths, you'll see us all the time, you know, with our banners up and handing out material, talking about what Vets4Energy does. You know, we put a voice in this program and a face to this program.
And that's one thing I know, James, you've used several volunteers around the country when you or somebody else goes out and does one of these, I just call them booth opportunities, but trade shows and fairs. What is it like? Is it the, you know, when you show up there and you're, call it manning the booth, is it uncomfortable? Is it good to meet people? What's that experience like?
It's a great opportunity because, you know, we get a chance to network more. I mean, honestly, some of the people that I've met have become lifelong friends at some of these events, trade shows, and especially the conferences for the veterans organizations. It's great for me to sit there and talk to the same people I talked to 2 years ago, and they look you up and they say, hey, brother, hey, sister, how are you doing? I haven't seen you since last year. So it's a good event, and it's a good way to network, and it's also good for your you know, for your just your whole mental health aspect, you know, to have some communications and outreach, and people will sit and listen to you, and they take what you say very serious. This was a wonderful museum down in Florida, and we got to go down there. It's a military museum, and we talked about Vets4Energy, and obviously when you get into a museum and you start talking about World War II history, let me remind you guys that it wasn't politics that really stopped General Patton's push into Germany. He ran out of fuel, and let me tell you something. He would have been in Berlin a lot quicker than the Russians would have been there. And the fact remains is that history can teach us so much. So we go in and we get an opportunity to talk about how important was energy to the war movement, especially in a war like World War II. So great opportunity to network with people, see new folks. And these are all opportunities that can be made available to our volunteers that join our program. Radio programs can be a call-in or it can be a set-in. This was another one down in Florida. It was a very interesting one. We actually had someone show up to the station to talk to us after this. So,
what's that like? How, again, it's an comfort and uncomfortability. I know you want to be familiar with the issues you're going to be talking about, but when you show up at a radio station or you get the opportunity to do a call-in, is that pretty, is it too easy to overthink that that's problematic? Is it actually easier than it would seem?
It's a lot easier than it seems. As a matter of fact, you know, you just got to go in there and be yourself. I mean, that's the one thing that I believe that most of our veterans possess, is the ability to be able to just be themselves. And sometimes that means telling the whole hard truth, the cold, hard truth on some of these issues. And you know, every now and then, you know, it gets a little lively and entertaining. But, you know, as long as you continue to tell the truth shall set you free, you know. And so we enjoy these call-ins because we get an opportunity to discuss things that we're very passionate about, which is our country and security of our nation. I mean, listen, I don't want my great-grandchildren to not have the opportunities that I've had. And, you know, and if we're not very careful, you know, we could limit their opportunities greatly. We can legislate and regulate their opportunities down to this is what you're going to be and this is what you're going to do, and I don't think that's what we need to do. Or, worst case scenario, we can limit ourselves and our ability to be able to reach out and defend our nation and our borders, but also to be able to go out and reach out and touch the enemy that's planning to do something, you know, miles and miles away. You know, we have to have these conversations. We cannot just sit on the sidelines anymore. It's so important. It's so important.
So I brought this slide in because I just saw a report that we had. I think it was 150 or 140 different placements of different quotes from volunteers of ours around the country. But wanted to throw that out to you too. Do you think it's important for folks to get into the media and in print?
It's absolutely important for a couple of reasons. Number one, to get the truth out. is the big thing, because, you know, we've seen the whole media can be an effective tool, and it can also be an ineffective tool. Generally, op-eds and articles that veterans themselves put in there, that, you know, that's looked on a little bit differently than just, say, a standard 6 o'clock news report, because there is a sense of, you know, and we have a tendency to dig a little bit deeper into the facts. We want to just talk about the facts. You know, we want to talk about the reality of things, and sometimes the facts don't meet that structured little message that people want. You know,
I think that's one of the reasons it's so easy for us to make those placements.
Yeah, I think so too. To testify local and federal, state legislative, Congress, you know, in front of different legislative branches. You know, it's good for us to be in there to testify. We have done that on more than one occasion. It helps them in their decision-making process. And then when you put it in an official format like that, then it becomes a matter of permanent record. So
I'd go so far as to say it doesn't always have to be, you don't have to be the expert on the topic being discussed. You're there to represent your perspective on it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Which isn't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You don't have to be the expert on it, but you have to give your perspective. You know, here's some profiles and jobs. We've got some wonderful people, you know, that are working in the energy sector right now. You know, Nick Porta from West Virginia, Coast Guard Academy graduate. You know, you got Michael there, and you got Leanne. I mean, we have a lot of wonderful folks that are involved in energy that are veterans, that do have a great voice, and their voice is being heard all over America.
And the second part of this is also letting folks know that profiles and jobs, we're helping veterans find the careers in energy. And if anyone on the call has anything to say or suggestions on that, feel free to send them in. That's how a lot of our conversations start. They come in through either our Facebook page or through the website to contact us. What a conversation can start. And I remember Michael up there on the left, we met him through the website, and it just evolved into finding out what he was doing, and he's finding out what we're doing, and we're all helping each other out now, finding new careers for veterans. So, you know, take a look at us, and it is, just as James was saying, it's all about a conversation. So we get to this last side right at 2:30, which means I don't know if we should actually open the doors to some of these, but I will. We'll take 2 more minutes.
Gotcha.
One question. What's the most powerful tool for influencing legislation?
The individual veteran's voice is perhaps our most valuable tool that we have. You know, the fact that we show up to either the the state or the national representatives' offices to have these discussions, you know, that's an effective tool. You know, all the op-eds and everything else are real important as well, but it's that one-on-one, face-to-face interaction with one of you as a veteran. That's the key thing. That's the key thing.
That's the last question. I was reading through these. What's the one thing you would ask somebody to do if they were going to be, let's say they fill out a registration form, they said they want to volunteer for Vets4Energy. What's the first thing you'd ask them to do? And that'll be the last question.
Well, the first thing that I would ask them to do would be to educate themselves on the energy issues in America. You know, do some research, do some studies. You know, don't be just focused on one or the other. You know, look into the several different energy resources that we have in America. And then also look at the whole world situation. Take a deep, hard look at the at things like what I just told you about how much are we importing from foreign nations. You know, nobody's going to stop driving cars. Nobody's going to stop driving and flying airplanes. You know, and I'm telling you, we're going to be dependent on petroleum-based fuels, fossil fuels, whatever you want to call them, for a very, very long time. So I want them to be educated. I think that would be the first thing that I would do. And then, you know, Get involved with community activities. You know, get to know who your local VSO commanders are. Talk to them. Get to know who your state legislator is and your federal legislators. Get to know them. Know what they stand for. And that's a good start. Do your recon, my friends.
Terrific. I see 6 or 7 other questions here. We'll get back to those folks with individual on email. But James, Captain McCormick, thank you very much for joining us. And thanks to all who signed up and registered. You'll be getting links to this material, like I said, tomorrow. And thanks. Everyone have yourself a good day.